So Israel's foreign minister, Shalom Katz, actually gave a statement on Israeli radio today that said that if Iran should attack Israel, Israel will respond, and it will respond directly to the homeland, to Iran specifically. Now, he then went on and tweeted that message, tagging the Iranians. So it seems to be that Israel is very, very serious about that. I don't think that Israel can accept a direct attack upon its sovereign soil without responding in kind. And we do have the ability to do so, according to foreign reports. For example, there are Israeli submarines in the Gulf that would put Iran squarely within range. And also, the state of Israel is reported to have a ballistic missile arsenal that has Iran within range as well. So Israel does have options at its disposal. We'll wait and see whether that is something upon which Israel calls. But I cannot see a scenario wherein the Iranians directly attack the state of Israel and the state of Israel responds merely by attacking and retaliating against Iranian proxies. It would have to, in a scenario of a direct attack from Iran, respond by attacking the head of the snake. So Hezbollah is ensconced inside southern Lebanon. They are what we would call a terror army. They are not a terror organization. They are a terror army, seriously trained, battle-hardened. They have been put to the test in conflict against ISIS, a mortal enemy of the Iranian regime. And their numbers rank right about 50,000 conscripts, plus another 50,000 reservists who can be called upon. So that puts their fighting force at about 100,000 fighting men. Now, where did their training come from? Their training came from Iran. Who determines when, how, and with what intensity Hezbollah strikes at the state of Israel, as they have been doing since October 7th? The answer to that is Iran. Where do we see the impact of Iran's tentacles here in this area, or rather the stranglehold of Iranian tentacles here in this area here in Israel? Well, about 80,000 of our civilians are currently refugees in their own country, having been evacuated from their homes in northern Israel into central and southern Israel in order to evade the rocket fire that has been launched upon Israel since October 7th, October the 8th, by Hezbollah at the behest and with the control of, and with Iran pulling the strings of all of that activity. So that's just in our northern front. We also see that Iran is working very, very diligently to ensconce itself in even greater fashion inside southern Syria. That's why we saw, for example, according to foreign sources, that the IDF dispatched Mohammad Reza Zahedi, who is the senior most commander of the IRGC, to have been eliminated since the killing of Qasem Soleimani in January 2020 by the Americans. That's because he was active in Syria. He was part of the Iranian effort to bring about greater forces, greater terror forces, and to establish a terror army on Israel's border inside Syria, increasing this arc that is really tightening around the borders of the states of Israel at this time. And then, just as another example, you of course have on our southern western flank massive Iranian import, training, and funding, not only to Hamas, who were the perpetrators of the attack on October the 7th against the state of Israel, but also to Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who really are an Iranian proxy in every sense of those words. And you also have the Houthis, who are harassing shipping lanes and the abilities of trade, import, export, and so forth, not just for Israel, but also for the entire region, and have been doing so at the behest of Iran. So you really do have a very serious series of threats that come from Iran into Iraq, over to Syria, into Lebanon, and then down to the Gaza Strip, and then off the coast of Yemen by way of the Houthis. And this is all coming to a head at this moment. So At some point, that regime in Iran is going to have to be tackled. Lastly, the massive threat that comes from southern Lebanon by way of Hezbollah and total Iranian proxy is worth speaking about and expressing clearly. In the event that Hezbollah deploys all that it has at its disposal, it has the capability to fire 2,000 rockets per day to any point within the state of Israel for a minimum of 100 days. And it is estimated that that is the intensity of fire that the Israel Defense Forces and the Israeli home front would have to conjure with. And that is not a situation that is tenable, and that is why most Israelis are hopeful that the Israel Defense Forces will operate inside southern Lebanon against Hezbollah in a very, very determined fashion before the guns fall silent in this period post-October the 7th. So, with regard to the response of the Israel Defense Forces to the threat that has come from Hezbollah inside southern Lebanon, and not just the threat, but also the firing and the deploying of munitions into the Israeli homeland at the hands of Hezbollah, I would actually say that the Israel Defense Forces has not responded with sufficient intensity. Now, I'm a minority view on this point, but it is my viewpoint nonetheless, and each passing day merely reinforces my initial opinion, which is that when October the 7th happened, after Hamas launched that brutal massacre against Israeli civilians from the Gaza Strip into Israel's southern enclave, when Hezbollah joined that fight, which they promptly did, the Israel Defense Forces should have struck Hezbollah first, in my opinion, in order to severely downgrade their aerial capabilities at a minimum. For the reasons that I've already mentioned, they have the potential to fire 2,000 rockets toward Israel per day for at least 100 days, and they also have up to 100,000 battle-tested, Iranian-trained terrorists who form their terror army. Now, since October the 7th, despite the fact that 80,000 Israelis, as I said earlier, are refugees in their own country, a total of 245 out of that approximately 100,000 strong fighting force of Hezbollah have been eliminated by the Israel Defense Forces. That, in my view, is not sufficient. That, in my view, is not sufficiently intensive. It's not delivering a sufficient blow to the capabilities of Hezbollah. And though we've moved on from the opportunity in the time where we could have struck Hezbollah first before going into the Gaza Strip, I very much hope that once the fighting wraps up inside the Gaza Strip, when that does come about, finally, the IDF turns its capabilities towards southern Lebanon and moves directly in there. Now, we are ready for that eventuality. We currently have about 3 divisions who are stationed right along our northern border with southern Lebanon. And that's for a moment where the IDF either determines that it wishes to operate inside southern Lebanon, or if Hezbollah is utilized to respond to the killing of Zahedi, which is unlikely. It's more likely that any such response will come from Iran's proxies in Iraq, not Iran's proxies in southern Lebanon. But in that event, the IDF is ready to deploy, and the Israeli Air Force is on high alert at any and every given moment.